Welcome to the Itty Bitty Podcast. I'm your host, Perry Phillips, and because I've killed so many brain cells, I feel like I'm getting dumber as I'm getting older. So the podcast is a great way to learn more about the things that I love. So each week we take a look at topics from the world of pop culture, including music, shout out to hip hop, movies, sports, comic books, video games, psychedelics, cannabis, and more. And the format might not always remain the same from week to week. I'm all over the place, what can I say? And I love the idea of a podcast that changes and grows with our listeners. So before we get too far, if you're listening so far, head over to ittybittypodcast.com to subscribe to the show on the platform of your choice, and make sure to say hi to us on social media. It's pretty much at Itty Bitty Podcast for everything. But without further ado, man, the Itty Bitty Podcast is anything but itty bitty. So let's get it going. Okay, we've made it to another episode of the Itty Bitty Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This week on the show, I have a father and son duo. Lou and Aiden come on the show from Lou and Aiden's Customs. Check out their Instagram page. They've got some really dope custom comic book toys. It's more like art than it is actual toys. They're really cool, laid-back guys, down to earth. Can tell they really love what they do. We talk a little bit about their dynamic and what it's like working together as a father and son, process behind them making these awesome toys, and we talked a lot about their love of comic books and how they have like a deep knowledge for the comic books and making the toys comic book accurate. So it's a really dope interview. These guys are really cool, so check them out, give them some love. This is not a podcast about badass custom comic book toys. It's the Itty Bitty Podcast. It's anything but, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Itty Bitty Podcast. It's the Itty Bitty Podcast. It's the Itty Bitty Podcast. The Itty Bitty Podcast.
All right. Lou and Aiden, thanks for coming on the show. With things as crazy as they are right now, people tend to turn to, comic books, video games, pop culture, that type of thing. And I've found myself just doing a deep dive on your Instagram page because you guys have some really cool stuff on there. So if you're listening to this podcast, pause, go over and check it out. It's Lou and Aiden's Customs. Is that the name of the Instagram page? Go check it out. You can be on there for hours, just looking at all the cool different comic book character creations and the mashups. And so why don't you start by telling everybody a little bit about your background in like nerddom, I guess, like what started you into nerd stuff?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it started early on. Back in New York, I was born and raised in New York, and about the only thing that was actually close by was like this corner candy store by a train station.
Okay.
Fortunately, that place wasn't just like a newsstand. It was actually a comic shop where the guy would order tons of comics, and it was everything. Like it was open to Marvel, DC, anything that you could think of was on there on those racks. They were all beat up comics, but
you don't see those anywhere.
Not anymore, dude.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been back to the old neighborhood a few years back. It's still around, but the comic rack is gone. No longer exists. But that's kind of where I started. I mean, I started reading anything across the board. I mean, I love the X-Men. I love the Avengers. That's kind of where it all started. I even read DC stuff. I used to love Batman and the Outsiders. Superman, not so much because I kind of got into it early on and then kind of drifted a bit. I always liked the heroes with a little bit of a dilemma as opposed to the guy.
I've never been big on Superman just because it's almost like it's unfair. Like to have all that power, like it's just it's a game changer. And so I just, to me, Superman was he's never my favorite character.
Yeah. I mean, I shifted. I kind of liked it during the John Byrne years, which I got really into for a while there. Just because the art was great and the storytelling was good. But then I shifted off. And I mean, from there, I was heavily into, I started to get early on into anime. I loved the Gatchaman, which is G-Force back in the days, and Voltron and all those shows. I got really into it as a kid. My mom was the teacher. My dad was a postman. So I had the means. Like my dad would kind of pick up a few comics or give me a few bucks, and I just grab as many as I could and just read them.
Right.
And that kind of started me out. I got really into like just the world of comic books, right? Like understanding superheroes and understanding writing and then the artwork really intrigued me. And that kind of set me off. It set me off on a path to go to art school eventually. And then like that's where my training came from initially.
Okay.
Um, some of it was self-taught, some of it was regular training. But I mean, it was funny when I was in junior high school. I was actually teaching the art class. My art teacher just basically sat down and let me run the drawing of anatomy and stuff like that. So that was my start. And then I will say Star Wars came into the picture. My uncle, I think he worked at a movie theater and he had a movie reel. And that's how I first saw Star Wars on a wall in my uncle's room.
Was that
So I got into that.
the original New Hope?
The original New Hope. Yeah, I saw it on a film reel on a wall. Yeah, on a wall in my uncle's room, and that was my introduction to Star Wars. It was interesting. So that all kind of just built up into sort of like a semi career into like this whole art world, and I was heavily into comics. I worked a little bit early on. I started to get some interest from Dark Horse Comics, and I had some interest from Image Comics a little bit. But I kind of saw that world was not paying.
Right.
It was a ridiculously difficult world, one, to get into and then to stay in. And that kind of shifted my career into other places. I still work in sort of an artsy type of situation. I'm in digital development and design, so I still work in creative and stuff like that. So with that said, a few years passed by. I was always into comics. My kids were always into comics. And then Aiden came along. This is my first boy. And I kind of just turned him into a geek. You know what I mean? Like I basically, he'll tell you, he became sort of like an encyclopedia. I had these huge Marvel and DC kind of breakdowns of all the superheroes. And this guy would spend hours just reading, looking at them, understanding them, drawing them. And we started to call him like the comic book encyclopedia, because no matter how much I knew, he knew more. Like it was weird. He'd tell me, power sets and, durability, like comparing the Hulk to the Juggernaut. He was a huge Hulk fan as a kid. Huge. He wanted nothing to do with
That's my favorite. Hulk is my favorite.
Yeah. So
I got the Hulk back here.
Tell him. About just your kind of introduction into that world.
Well, I grew up might as well with all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's what got me into it, really, was you.
Yeah. So it kind of started that way. We would read comics together. We go to the comic shop together. My daughter is actually probably, of everyone now, the new artist in the family.
Now
so she's picking it up. So she likes to go to the comic shop. She's 9, going on 10. She loves this whole world. It's kind of built for that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that led when we went from New York, we moved to Florida for a few years. I was looking for an outlet for that creativity. Like I would sketch things. He would tell me to draw like a superhero. I would draw it for him, and he'd be like, "Holy crap, this is just like the comic books," like he'd lose his mind as a kid. And then that led to like when we moved out to California, we started to get into like I have a huge collection of toys, by the way, from way back from when I was a little kid. So I still have my G.I. Joe collection. I still have my Voltron. I still have a few Transformers and toys in this house. Basically the house is full of toys. Let's just put it that way. And now he's a little older, so he plays baseball now, so it's less of the toy thing. But for a long time, action figures, toys, and all that stuff came into the picture. And then I was like, you know what? Why don't I, without even knowing that customs existed and that people were actually working on them at the time, I actually started to just pick them up and started to work on different things. I always had great ideas in terms of like concepting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, you know what? It'd be cool if we could bring this stuff to life, and that's how Lou and Aiden's came into existence. It just started one day in the living room where we sat down and he was talking to me. He was like, it'd be really cool if so-and-so, if we did this, and how about if we did that? And I was like, you know what? That actually is pretty cool. I was really good at sculpting in school. So it just grew into what it is now. Basically, is like that now.
I definitely want to get into the whole process behind what you guys do. But yeah, with the customs and stuff, it's like the possibilities are endless with that. You can do
Hmm.
pretty much anything that you want to. If you can think about a character, you can kind of create it. And I mean, it's the same thing with creating a comic, but when you're doing it with action figures and stuff, I feel like it's just more real life. You know, it's almost like jumping off the page at you. So you said that Aiden had a good skill about, like, you know, mashing up power set skill sets and stuff. Was that
Hmm.
something that you guys tried to keep, you know, comic book accurate when you're doing customs, or are you just like, you know, let's just go for it, or are you know, trying to kind of keep them similar as far as their skill sets go?
Yeah, I think we lean more towards the comic book accurate, right? Like in terms of like power sets and things like that. Um, like every so often, I think we did like a quick like fun what if few customs
Mm,
that we did a few years back, where what if Shazam was like Thor and they became something of a combination, or what if like Superman and so, and we started to we mess around with that stuff, but I think where we lean more towards is taking something that currently exists and expanding on it. So if we see something cool in the comics, like a Venom thing, like everything is Venom verse right now. While I love that type of stuff, I think it's kind of been overplayed the past
mm-hmm.
few years. So, we would take something, we would sit down and I would say, hey, look, so I'd like to do like something with the scroll, right? Like, let's just do something really cool, something off the chart, something crazy. And he would be like, well, we could venomize a scroll. That'd be wicked. And then we'd like, you know what, that would actually be cool because you combine the Fantastic Four powers with the Venom sort of type of thing, and then you throw in maybe Spidey villains in there, and all of a sudden you got yourself like a really cool thing that people would like. When they see it, it just grabs them, right? Like, and I think more of this is about not necessarily the from a perspective of kit bashing or sculpting or creating, cool toys. It's more about the creativity aspect. I think we focus on that.
Right.
That's like our I think that's where our strength lies. Is we'll sit down and we'll concept something really quickly. We'll grab a few things, and actually on the fly, like we'd be in like Target, and we see something, in a rack or something, and I'm like, dude, how cool would it be if we take that and kind of shift something, do some shifting of that, and blend it into like knee pads or shoulder pads or do something like that. And then he'll jump in and he'll say something like, you know what, like let's add wings to so and so. Like let's just expand on that. And then it just becomes like a mashup of ideas. And we have stockpiled on so much stuff that luckily, and we've had so many commissions that we end up keeping a lot of stuff as well. So people send us, and we do work, and we end up keeping some stuff. And in truth, I take like I'll show you now, like something interesting, like this Terminator leg. Right, this is a leg from a 15-inch Terminator,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd actually like start sitting here right now. We're looking at creating a bike for Lobo, right?
Oh, that'll be
And
dope.
so like we have like something like this from one series, right? This is from Halo. We
Oh,
take
okay,
something
yeah.
like this, we take a look at it, and then we have Cosmic Ghost Rider's bike, right? And then we'd actually start like blending pieces. We'll take that leg and like extend out the bike and add something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
make the bike bigger. So it's all about like I think the creativity part is what drives us. I think that's what people gravitate to. Anybody can make a custom, right? Like you could slap together a few arms and a few legs, switch a head, and that's cool. But it's more than that, right? Like it's the paint, it's the sculpting, it's the visual representation of it. That's what it's more about for us. So
Yeah.
like when we look at it, we want to walk away and say, shit, man, like even though we created it, it's not about us.
Right.
It's more like about like how are people gonna see this? You know what I mean? And when he says, dude, that's dope, we know right then and there, we're like, all right, people are going to love this. And like, that's really the goal. We just like to see people enjoy the work, you know what I mean?
Right.
And give us feedback.
I was gonna say it's dope too, because if you you know, you might take a character that you haven't thought about in forever, and then you mash it up with something, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I forgot this character even exists. And so you start thinking about it, and you start taking that walk down memory lane. And yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the process, and I guess now's the time as any to get into it. So you say you have stockpiled just toys on toys. Is it like anytime you see something, you're like, let's just get it, we'll need it at some point? Or is it like, let's go searching for specific pieces for what we need?
It's a combination.
Okay.
And he'll tell you, right? Like,
Depends.
it depends.
If
Like,
it's like a spawn type figure that we need, like it's just for the pieces, then we'll try and find it. But if it's like something that we want, then we'll get it.
Okay.
yeah. So, I mean, it's random. Like, sometimes, like, I'll remember things, like I'll remember Spawn figures that I bought years ago that I have sitting in a stockpile.
I was gonna say your memory for that stuff must be like crazy, just because of all the different toys. Like, I'm a huge toy fan. I love toys. I've got a bunch of toys. That's I buy toys to invest, and I'm like, I'm gonna sell this down the road, and then I don't do it. I'm just gonna keep it. And so, and so, like, for me, just the sheer volume of different toys that are out there that you could just choose from. I mean, you just have to. It's crazy. I just can't imagine how big that encyclopedia has to be to just be able to pull up, like, I need the piece from, this series of Spawn.
Yeah.
And that's nuts. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, there's part of it is that, and part of it is just literally, like, I'll be sitting at my table. You see it back here, right? Like, if I'll show you the table back there, you'll see, like, hold on, let me shift you over so you can see it a little closer. But you'll see, like, a stockpile of different things, right? And we could be making, let's just say, a Venom pool, right? Mm-hmm. We could be making a Venom pool, and then 4 other figures at the same time. We end up right now, we're probably doing about 10 different commissions right now. So what happens is, when the table is kind of set up like that, a lot of the time, it's like I don't know if it's something that over the years you learn as an artist, but it's actually looking at this stuff. And sometimes I'm not even using the stuff to my left, and I'm working on a project on my right, but I'll look to the left and I'm like, dude, those would make great knee pads. And so I'll pull out something from there. And, like, having that sort of, like, I think it's a willingness to gamble too, right? Like, everybody sometimes gets so stuck on the structured part, like, oh, like, that's a knee joint. That knee joint has to be a knee joint on something that I'm working on.
Right.
I think if you look at something, a knee joint could actually be a shoulder pad. A shoulder pad could actually be a cover of a boot. You know what I mean? And sometimes, like, being able to kind of see that, and I think it takes years of practice. It's not something that happens overnight. I think it just takes practice of kind of thinking really outside of the box to come up with something cool, right? Like, whether it's fur, like we were in a Hobby Lobby maybe about 2 months ago, and Aiden will tell you, we're sitting there, and as we're walking through, we saw, like, furs, like, on the wall. And so I was like, dude, how dope would it be to put a real fur on Thor? Right. Like, and while that has been done, there's ways of doing it a little different. And so, like, you have, like, this guy right here, let's show them real quick, grab him, we have a client in LA who loves the Hulk. This guy, that's why we have a lot of Hulk stuff. He's kind of commissioned us to do a crap load of Hulks for him on different scales. And so this is a hulked out Thor that the character exists, but we were like, let's just throw some really wicked new design on it. Like, the character exists, but let's throw fur on him, like how you see Asgardians and sort of Vikings, and let's throw something else, a tunic on him, and get some wrap around his arm. And so this guy right now is on the bench. We sculpted his whole head, right? And if you see him, his whole head is resculpted. He's got the fur on the shoulders. See it? And so, like, that's kind of like that type of thinking that I'm talking about, right? Like, it's like just not necessarily like seeing it, but not seeing it exactly for what it is. Being a little bit of, like, seeing things a little differently than normal. Like reach out the box, try something different, and it usually pays dividends.
And are you drawing everything out before like you, or is it just like
Yeah.
let's throw everything on the table and kind of go to work?
Yeah, I would say about maybe 70% of the time we do that. Like I'll sketch something, like I'll be at work, I'll sit back, during lunch, and then I'll just say, you know what, like good idea would be like I'll get inspired by something like Loki. Let's just those horns on Loki's head. It'd be dope if I sketch something out like that. Let's see what we can do, how we could come up with something really cool with other things. So I'll sketch parts. Sometimes I'll sketch the entire character and would be like, okay, so arms, I'll point at the arms. These are the armor. This is the armor that I'm thinking. This is the knee pads that I'm thinking. The head, I'll sketch the head and I'll say to myself, well, there's kind of 5 different heads. And if you ever see, sometimes we take pictures and post them on Instagram of the figure, right? And then all these pieces all around him, right? Like there'll be like 25 different pieces around him, 3 different heads, 2 different shoulder pads, 2 different hands, feet, and like initially that's where it's coming from, the art side. Like we take the art side, sketch it, plan it out, and then all of a sudden we got all these pieces in front of us and we're still deciding what's going to happen. Like
Right.
at that point, like it's like, will this work? Will this not work? Like, and if you look at one that we did a few years back, like we're working right now on a Hulk that's a Mecha Hulk that
Ooh,
we've
cool.
been commissioned for, and I think it's on the Instagram page, and you'll see how many pieces initially are on there. Then all of a sudden, we'll do the first round of like testing to show what we've come up with initially, and there'll be different pieces. Like all of a sudden, you have the third head instead of, there's 4 different options. We picked option number 3, and then we'll test it with option number 2, and we'll test it. Then we'll test the knee pads and the boots and all that different stuff, just to kind of blend it properly. Right. And I think, as coming from as an artist, there's something that we learned called the line of action, right? And that line of action in anything, is what gives sort of a character in a comic book sort of depth, right? Like all of a sudden the line of action goes from being a flat character running across the page to a character running outside of the page, right? And so, that different sort of perspective and views of things, and that line of action, I kind of utilize that with these characters as well, which is why you'll see like sometimes we'll have characters with like thunder coming out of their hand, or they're posed a certain way, or you'll see a Cyclops with the smoke coming out of his glasses. It's in our heads, it's more about like, it's almost like a moving toy, right? We want it to look like Cyclops just shot his beam and is sort of like walking towards something, and the smoke, whatever's coming out of his eyes is coming, like a lot of that is that, and you'll see it in our work a lot. We do it a ton. And I think it adds things. People get excited when they see stuff like that because they almost feel like the toy's alive. I don't know. That's just me.
There's been a couple of things that you've posted on Instagram where I'll go and I'll look at it, and I'll on a second look, I'll notice details that I didn't notice the first time. And that's, some of my favorite part about it is just the little details. So let me ask you this. Is there a project out there that like is your either holy grail, like that you want to do that you haven't been able to do for whatever reason, or what, or is there a project out there that would have been like one of your favorite projects, but it just either was scrapped or, just never saw the light of day?
Yeah. I mean, there's times like you'll see us, which rarely we do, because the one thing that we're really like focused on is we love to, when we start something, we finish it.
Okay.
We're not those guys who, like, there's guys out there, and no disrespect to any of them, we love them all. Like we don't like knock anybody's work, man. It's all about the art. I mean, we love everybody's work. That's just how we work. But there's guys out there who shoot stuff out and they'll show 50 different customs that they're working on, and you'll never see the finished product.
Right.
Ever. And that kills me. Like, it just kills me just because of how I grew up in the trade. Like, you start something, you finish it. It's just like a comic book, right? Like pages 1 through 18, you start it and you finish it. 18th page, the end. You finish it though. So a lot of the time you'll see progressively, like we try to show different stages so that people can see, hey, where we're at, work in progress, update number 2. Oh, added new shoulder pads and hope you guys like that. Like we'll throw that out there. But at the end, usually the signature shot or images or video usually have our logo on it and the character's name at the bottom. If you look at that, that means this character is done. We finished him. He's either shipping out, you know what I mean, in a few days to whoever it belongs to, or he is now sitting on our shelves somewhere in this like craziness of toys here. And in the beginning, I will tell you that we did not take commissions. We refused to take commissions in the beginning. I think the first 3-4 years.
So you did it for free?
We did our own work.
Oh,
we
gotcha. I got you. You just were doing it as okay. I was like, what?
We basically, we had a really hard time parting with our pieces. Not because of anything, but because we put so much love into them that when it came to it, Aiden would give me a hard time. I would tell him, hey, listen, like I'm thinking of putting up the logo for sale. He's like, what are you talking about? Like, no way, dude. All the work that went into that, are you crazy? Like, he would give me this whole spiel of why we shouldn't sell him. And so I put him back on the shelf and he lives there for another 2 years,
Yeah.
So it was maybe about 2.5 years ago of doing this that we started getting a lot of questions. Like, it wasn't like, people here and there. We started getting people saying, hey, like, I would really love to buy your, the Spawn design, that medieval Spawn that you did a few years back. Would you be interested in selling them? And so as the more questions came in, and then of course I'm married, understand that a wife is definitely, she throws a wrench in a lot of stuff. So she started to say, what are you going to do with all this stuff? Like, it's all great. It's all cool. But you collect, you make, you do all this stuff. Like, we have tons of stuff, and she would wean me about it, dude, over and over again. That doesn't include the comic book collection that I've carried over the last few years.
I'm in the same boat. My wife is like, so you're selling some of these comics, right? I'm like, eventually, I'm waiting, I'm waiting until the market's right. And I've got like trading cards, sports cards. I've got action figures. And yeah, it's the same thing. She's just like, when's some of this stuff going to be going out the door?
I know. I mean, it's interesting because she comes in here and she just looks at everything and she starts to calculate and she goes, do you know how much money you have in here? Like, literally, even if you sold this stuff for half the price, there's a ton of money in here. And so, out of the funness of it, I think that's kind of what compelled us. And then it was actually interesting to start listening to people and saying, well, people will come to us and say, I would love to see your version of Hyperion, right? Like, it would be great for you to do a Hyperion. We would love to see your work. And by the way, I would be willing to pay X amount of dollars. And that kind of, that coupled with everything else started to get us like, you know what? Maybe like the fun part of all of this was we loved making them at one point, but then now it's kind of about a legacy a little bit. Like, it kind of became
maybe we can make another logo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we got to a point where we started to say, you know what? Every piece we can add a unique element to it that's different, but it could sit on someone else's shelf instead of ours. And then that's where this all started to expand out to. We did it a little bit. We took 20 the first year commissions. I think it's 3 years we've been doing. We took 20 the first year. And I was like, I'm not doing more than 20 commissions because I want the creativity to stay the same. And then the following year we did 60. And then this year, I mean, just starting between the end of last year to this year, we've done quite a bit. And so that all has sort of grown into what Lou and Aiden's is, like right now. And we just really enjoy doing it. It's really, that's what it's all about, And a lot of guys keep asking us, like, how do you guys do this stuff? And, like, I was like, you got to love it first. Like, if you love it, you'll put that extra oomph into it. And people will recognize that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much us in a nutshell, man. Like, we'll sit here, and especially now that everyone's on lockdown, we've been having some fun. We finished up Exodus a few days ago for a guy out in Atlanta. So he commissioned us, and so we finished him up, sent him out. We did Hyperion and Cyclops. Just got, we finished those guys up. And then these Hulks, we're working on them, but we're doing literally at least 15 projects all at the same time. Like they're all being done, but we do really well with the time management thing. We spend specific time. Nah, I mean, I literally wish I could show you all the bins of pieces that we have broken into specific sections. So when I say to myself, you know what, I'm going to make a snake, guys. Let's just use that. Like, so I want to have a certain type of gear. I have a whole stash of military type gear, and I go in that I've accumulated over the years, and I just start looking at it and seeing how to make that work. And the same thing with everything else. I mean, we have body parts, hands, legs. I mean, like, I can't even begin to tell you how much of this stuff we have laying in bins, but we are organized enough to know where everything is. So when we are looking for a specific foot, that foot is in bin this one, boot bin, and we pull it out, and then sometimes if we go with it, sometimes we might actually find something better.
You guys are like action figure serial killers.
Yeah, good way to put it. In some respects, that is true.
So is the end game, to do this full time and do only this, or is this going to be, is this just something that you like to do and you'll kind of take a max on commissions every year?
I think it's a combination of things. Who knows, right? Like the thing is that my career, I've done very well career-wise in my lane of digital production and working in technology and that world. That's my world, and I've done well there. So it's hard to just say goodbye to that. You know what I mean? Because a lot of the creativity that comes into all of this works in all of that, right? Like my job is essentially to concept. Let's just throw out an example. We have a huge Super Bowl pitch that's coming up, right? And I'm working with a specific client, which I can't say right now. But, that whole thing is a creative aspect of things. I have to sit back, I have to concept, I have to think how that can happen from A to Z, right? Until the day that goes live. So a lot of it aligns with what we do here. You know what I mean? So I get enough of the creativity in that I don't necessarily think that I need to leave that world completely. Right. I think the end game for us, I mean, who knows if ever we were approached to create an action figure toy line, sure, we jump all over that. Do I have the time to do it? I'd be telling you right now, it would be difficult with everything, but we would make the time to do it, right. But again, to me, that's not the end goal. I think really the end goal is just the fun aspect of and the creativity aspect of it. I just love doing it. Right. He loves doing it. I mean, we have a lot of fun with people commenting on it. We have fun with friends saying, dude, you guys really make that stuff? And then they come to the house and they can't believe how much of this stuff actually exists. And then we both played sports. So we were both really, I was a good baseball player, football player. He's a baseball player, really good baseball player, football player. So we come from a world where sort of the spiel on geeks is the total opposite. Yeah. So it's really interesting, right? Like, so jocks and geeks at one point in time were totally separate. I tell him that all the time. Back in my time, the two groups were completely separated. So I had my super geek, friends that knew about Star Wars and that were artists and RT. And then I would run over and play baseball in the afternoon with the baseball team or the football team. And those guys were totally the opposite, right? So I had to learn how to balance that. He's fortunate because we're in an era where geeks are actually cooler than athletes to some extent. And being a little bit of both is actually an even cooler thing. You know what I mean? So he's lucky in that sense. So that takes up a lot of our time too. A lot of people ask us, how do we even have time to do this stuff? Because we train, we're constantly training. He's in school, trains, after school, then he's got schoolwork, and then he sits back and he helps me here. Then I've got work. I help him, and we work together when we train. We weightlift. We work on his hitting and fielding, and then we're in here tinkering with shit. It's a lot. But like I said, you have to love it, man. If you love it, it doesn't feel like work.
You get
It
used to
feels
it.
like it feels like just part of our daily lives. It's so ingrained in us at this point that we can't do it without the other. You know what I mean? Like it's just a whole cycle
Right.
throughout our day.
What type of stuff do you guys disagree on?
Oh, he's a knucklehead. So he thinks he knows it all. He thinks he knows it all. So remember that part where I told you he's an encyclopedia?
Yeah.
It kind of got to
Always fight.
it gets in his head sometimes. So he like, you know, he's as adamant about his belief in things. He's got a lot of his mother in him. He's about as adamant about his belief in certain things that he will fight me to the tooth and nail to the end. I would be like, dude, I come from an art background, dude. Like, I know what I'm talking. He's like, yeah, all right, Mr. Know-it-all. And he's kind of right. You know what I mean? Like, you need that kind of, I think the blessing in the whole thing is that we come from different eras of geekdom, right? Like, I come from the old school, traditional, artistic. I learned the specific way. I'm very structured and trained. I saw the original Star Wars, and the superheroes that existed in my time were not the same as the superheroes that exist in his time. And then he comes from, you know, you got to remember, he's got Dragon Ball Z and he's got Power Rangers. He had, we both had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Power Rangers, not so much, but the world that he comes from, the level of anime where it has gone to from my time. I mean, I was watching G-Force and Voltron, and that was about the extent of the anime that I knew of, and that blew me away, right? And then Thundercats came along, and that just had me on the floor as a kid. Like, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. He's already had that, on top of he now has Avengers movies, he has Doctor Strange, he has the Hulk, he has movies to actually that are tangible that I was dreaming of when I was a kid. So the perspectives are very different in the way that we approach things and see things because we come from a different generation of geekdom. Like, like he sees things differently than I do at times, but it works. I will tell you that because there's a lot of times where I'm working on something and he says something and it actually resonates. Like, it's like, holy crap, dude. Like, I didn't even think of that in that perspective, but yeah, that makes a ton of sense to do it that way. And then we're doing something, So pretty much that's how we function. I mean, we just have a lot of fun with it,
So I want to ask you guys a couple random questions.
Sure.
Usually I do, I'll pick a couple different random things to do. So let me see which one we're going to start with here. So let's start with this one. So because of everything that's going on, I want you guys to think up a mashup, a superhero mashup that would be able to defeat the coronavirus easily.
Oh.
Like which superhero mashup would you call on to save the day right now?
It'd be interesting. What are you thinking?
Well, if we need smarter people, then I would choose a smarter people, like heroes with higher IQs, like Mr. Fantastic.
Reed Richards? Yeah. You do need a melding of super minds to kind of come up with the virus solution.
Okay, I like where your head's going.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be my first approach, and I think it seems like that's where he's going with it, where, Reed Richards and Tony Stark and some of the greatest minds in the Marvel Universe. I would even pull in Doom, right? Like, Doom is about controlling all things, but whenever the world is in need, he isn't stupid enough to think of, if there was no world, what am I, what I mean? Exactly. What am I in control of? So I think that there's a genius behind that. I think the minds is what's needed. And I think right now, especially with the coronavirus, we probably need the most intelligent people on this planet to, at the very least, come up with something to kind of save the day at this point. I mean, for me, I think that's where we would land in terms of like how that could happen. But I mean, there's so many other things, right? Like, how cool would it be for people to just like meld with a symbiote, right? Like a venom, and then we don't have to worry about the disease, right? Like at all, or the virus for that matter, right? We become sort of like these hybrid, indestructible people. So yeah, that's where we're at, man.
Yeah. Ah, that was a
That'd
good
be
answer. I
fun.
like that. That was, I mean, yeah, I would have thought gone a different direction and gone like which powers, but yeah, I guess like we do need smart people
Yeah, I
to
think it's
handle
hard.
things.
It's hard to think of powers, right? Like, because when it comes to like saving lives, right? Like, they really aren't like super medical guys.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like it usually has to be something that they can uh, provide to help with that, right? Like Marvel Zombies is a good example of that, right? Like the Marvel Zombies comic, when the virus spread, right? There was some of the most intelligent minds were gone already. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, and so it just became like use your abilities to survive the best way that you can. And that series went crazy for a little bit, but I loved it. Deceased is good too. I will say.
Deceased.
I don't know if you've read that.
I haven't read this.
Deceased.
I've got a couple copies of Deceased that I haven't got to yet. Marvel Zombies I did not get into, but that sounds really dope.
Early on, it was good.
Yeah,
The second wave, not as good, but Deceased is really good.
Deceased. Those
Yeah.
covers are sick. The Deceased covers.
The artwork is fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So let's go with another random question here. So best part, my favorite part of like the 80s and 90s. I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, and you know, the best part about a lot of the action figures was that there was TV shows to go along with them.
Yes.
So what would you guys, who would be your pick for like mashup for a TV show in 2020?
Mashup and TV show.
For like an old school cartoon type TV show.
Old school. Oh, you want to know something that I've always wanted to see? He doesn't know too much about it, but I told him about it. But you remember that? I don't know if you remember that cartoon, Silverhawks.
Silverhawks. It sounds familiar. Was it a
Yeah.
comic book?
No, wasn't a comic book related 80s cartoon, but they were sort of like a they were bird versions, technological advanced versions of Thundercats. So each one had
Oh,
like a
yes.
suit like Iron Man.
Now I know
You know
you're
what I
talking
mean?
about. Yeah.
And then they had like suits and they could do different things. But I always wanted to see like how that world would combine with like the technology of Tony Stark and Iron Man and make like a group of heroes like that because they were really cool. They had birds and like one of them had a hawk, the other one had an eagle, and like each one had like, but they were pretty badass like at that time. But in terms of like blending things, I mean, honestly, I think what everybody at this point wants to see is I think we've all kind of ingested enough of the Marvel heroes and the DC heroes, right? I think it would be cool if DC and Marvel just kind of put their shit aside and like did some interesting crossovers. Like, who's gonna lose on a cartoon that does a great crossover?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think anyone loses on that, and I do think the market at this point, especially for the DC side more so, would lend itself well to it, right? Like we talk about, like, what are your favorite cartoons right now? Of the most recent that we saw.
The most recent?
Flashpoint, right?
Yeah, I used to like a lot of the DC shows and stuff more than Marvel shows.
The cartoons, yeah, for sure.
Like the original Batman.
I watched a little bit of that. Like, yeah, I watched more like DC than Marvel. Like, well, the only show that I really liked from Marvel was like the Incredible Hulk cartoon.
Yeah,
that was like the best one for me.
Yeah.
But then I also like the Flash series that they had too, because I love Flash. So it was like.
But you mean more on the cartoon side? Yeah, you're talking TV and cartoons,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, I think we found that in ourselves too. I think I grew up more heavily in Marvel because I grew up in the era of the X-Men. You know what I mean? And the X-Men were like huge during my time growing up, right? Like they were massive, and then McFarlane started drawing Spider-Man, and Spider-Man became popular, and then from the X-Men, it went to X-Force, and all these great things started to happen in that world. But what we found is that for TV shows, Marvel doesn't really do a ton of good TV shows anyway, but TV shows, definitely, we love watching The Flash.
DC ones, yeah.
Yeah. And
the X-Men show from the 90s was one of my favorites.
Yes,
That
he
intro.
didn't. He's seen it bits and pieces, but
Disney
he didn't
Plus.
experience the hysteria. Yeah, he didn't. He didn't experience sort of the hysteria of that,
I used to
because I
watch
remember.
those.
But he watched them too.
When that
I
guitar
used to
riff
watch them.
comes in, that's when you know.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, there were so many good ones. I used to like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and then I remember when the X-Men crossed over into that. Remember those times? I mean,
Yeah.
there was some good stuff. I mean, I think that '80s generation of cartoons was significantly better than on a regular basis than what we see now, right? Like the kids don't get the cartoons like on
You don't
daily or weekly basis like the way we used to back in the days.
That's why I don't understand people who complain constantly about all the different adaptations and all the different if you go back and you watch, like when I was growing up, my mom would like get ready for work. She was a single mom, so she would get ready for work while I was getting ready for school, and I would throw on the TV and I would watch all the old shows of like, Batman. I would watch the Adam West Batman, and like
Mhm.
it was cool as a kid, but like if that was all we had, if Adam West Batman was all we had, then
Right.
we'd have a reason to complain. There's so many options that I just don't understand why people just don't change, like flip to a different YouTube video or go to a different Netflix series or go to a different
I
comic
hear
book
you.
series. It's just there's so
Yeah,
many
there's a
options.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff out there. I mean, but for me personally, I do enjoy the DC cartoons too.
Mhm.
Like what we call cartoons, because these are like modified, better versions of cartoons. Like they're true, like they're real stories within a window. But we've watched those a ton of times. I mean, I did love the Incredible Hulk and Wolverine one.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Remember
That was one of the best ones.
The Hulk,
Yeah.
Wolverine, Hulk, Thor.
Yeah, Hulk Wolverine. But the Hulk Wolverine was a lot of fun because Deadpool was in that.
Yeah.
Remember? And then there were like a few, like the Weapon X program was in that.
Mhm.
That was a really, really well done cartoon, as well as what is it? Is it Planet Hulk?
Yeah,
Planet Hulk is
awesome,
good too. Yeah.
Love
So those
Planet
are
Hulk.
good. I mean, if there was ways, in terms of mashups, I would love to see things, even outside of the scope, like things like, a lot of heroes in Image Comics we've seen through the years. I would like to see some of those make it into cartoons. You know what I mean? But
Right.
but I think for the most part, I think it would be a lot of fun to see Marvel and DC put some differences aside and make something happen, even if it's in a cartoon format. It would be great. Like to see like Avengers Justice League and something big that happens, an epic space odyssey type thing where the universes end up combining or end up having to save each other's universe by uniting. Like that would be really epic. I think I would definitely pay to see that too.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Sure.
So what's either like a toy or like a piece of a toy that you have been looking for a long time and you're still looking for? Like I know you said that if there's a piece that you want, you get it. So is there one that you're still like in an eBay bidding war for, or like what's the holy grail toy for you?
Holy grail toy
that you would want to work on.
That's a whole different ball game.
Well, we can do both. We can do Holy Grail toy for your collection, and then let's do Holy Grail for like if you were gonna desecrate any old toy that people would just
the
be
one
like,
toy that you really wanted was the Voltron toy.
Yeah, and we got it.
Yeah.
So for a number of years,
that's the Holy Grail toy.
Yeah, for a number of years. As a kid, I remember my dad one time. I mean, we didn't come from like a whole lot of money, so toys were like my dad loved toys. He wasn't artistic, he wasn't anything, but that man loved toys, and that was always something that we connected really well on. And one day he came home and he brought the Holy Grail, which was a Voltron that he bought in Chinatown, in New York, and so. Years passed, went to school, did all these things. And my mom, for the most part, I was able to save some things, but there were some things I wasn't able to save. And for a long time, I wanted that die-cast Voltron figure, the big one. I was wanting that thing for years. And my wife kept saying, no, you can't spend that type of money on that and blah, blah, blah. And finally, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I finally got him. And he's just like sitting up there. Now, Voltron, so people understand why I love that cartoon. That actually was my inspiration to become an artist. I was a kid, and all I did every day was try to draw that
And then this
that character.
this,
Like
this
it was everything about it. You know what I mean? And so that piece means a lot more to me. You know what I mean? In terms of like historical value,
Right.
it means a ton to me. You know what I mean?
He also wanted the Millennium Falcon too.
And I wanted a giant Millennium
That was
Falcon.
mine. That
He
was
is
mine.
up on this wall.
That
right
was
here.
mine. The one that opens
He
up.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
I had a
He
friend
opens
whose
up.
brother had that one, and we used to like. I think he was getting rid of all of them at one time, and they threw them all in a bin, and I think they got rid of it, and they didn't tell me that they were getting rid of them, and I was so mad because I would have paid for that.
Oh,
Like,
I would have been
loved
pissed.
that
But
thing.
let me tell you a story. You're gonna love our story on that
We
one.
met that on a freaking.
We bought that. We lived in Florida for 5 years, right? It was like super hot day, and we were like, let's like run through the neighborhood and just kind of like have fun walking through the neighborhood. And somebody has a garage sale, and these kids have this thing sitting on the grass outside for like 2 hours. And I walk by and I'm like, oh my God. You know how much I got that thing for? You wouldn't believe it.
$5.
$10.
$10.
$10.
Did
is
you
what I got
talk
it for.
them down to 10, or were you just like, I'll take it for 10?
No, I walked up, I looked at it, and I was like, holy crap, this thing is in like really good condition. You know, like I started looking for the pieces, and the pieces were there.
All there.
And I said, oh my God. So I told the lady, I was like, I thought she was going to tell me she wanted $60-$70 for it because it's a Star Wars. So you know how people are.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think they knew what they had because when they didn't realize that the top opened up and there were a ton of pieces in there. There was pieces in there that were never touched.
Oh my goodness.
And she's like, yeah, just give me $10. I walked off with that thing. And that thing now hangs on my wall. It is like a piece that I love.
Legendary piece we had.
And then for a number of years, I wanted, just so you know, there's nothing out there currently that I'm desperately wanting. Fortunately, we've been able to kind of grab those things through the years. But there was one for a long time that I really wanted, which was Fin Fang Foom, the Build-A-Figure.
Right.
And I wanted him really bad. And $300, $200, I was like, damn, man, like I love toys. I'd be willing to spend that much on something else. I don't know if I'd be willing to spend that on him. And I fortunately was able to get him for about $160
Nice.
from a guy. But he sits on our shelf over here. You can see him here.
I
We
think
have
I saw a
shelf behind
picture.
him.
I think he had a picture on Instagram of that one. I was like,
Yes.
I was wondering
Yep.
if you.
Well, you had the Hero Click version.
Yeah.
For him for so
Yeah, I had the Hero Click version, which from San Diego Comic Con came along, which is that one.
Wow,
Gotcha.
this thing's
For a
old.
long time. He's a beautiful piece too, but I really wanted that guy, and I got him about a year and a half ago. But currently, like right now, I see toys a few different ways now. You know, as you get older, you start to see them a little differently. He sees them a little differently now too. We love them. We like have wants, but I think we've been lucky. Like I said, we've really been lucky in getting some of like these like integral pieces that we wanted to the collection. And so we have them. I mean, I think one of the most fun things we bought in recent years that we were stoked for like 2 weeks was the Justice League Batmobile. I don't know if you've seen that thing. That thing is like, I mean, it's right now, it's sitting on my wall.
It's a tank.
I actually hung it up because see it right there?
Oh yeah, that thing is a tank.
Oh my God. Now the level of excitement that occurred when that thing came, I ordered it. I can't even tell you how excited this guy was. He like lost his shit. And so like we were like, and we played with that thing. We didn't even drive it around. We just visually
Just looked at it.
played with it and looked at it and just moved the pieces just because it's such a huge piece. It's beautiful. It is a great piece. I dream of that piece actually repainting it and making it look like a little Warren with like the metal scratches and stuff. I think that's gonna happen. I just don't want to do it yet because I still just love the piece so much. I don't want to mess with it yet.
Right.
You know.
I can't wait for all this stuff to be over. I was like just about to go like on my yard sailing season, and I made it to one flea market before they started locking everything down. I'm like, man, that's some of the stuff you can find at yard sales.
Oh, yeah.
It's just crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Craziness.
He'll tell you.
And
We
it's-
have found
so many things.
we live in Orange County, California, and so there's like flea markets. Like,
Have you been to the San Bernardino one?
$300.
Yep, we've been to. You're talking about whatchamacallit? He's talking about Frankenstein's, right?
I used to live in
Frankenstein's
San
stuff?
Fernando Valley for a couple years, and I would drive out to San Bernardino for that flea market every once in a while. They always had awesome stuff. You can get toys, video games, craziness.
Yeah, that place. And now they bought a new building, so now it's huge. New parking lot, cool stuff. We didn't get to go yet because of we've been talking about going the last few weeks, but we've been so busy as the family, and then this hit, and now no one's going anywhere.
Right.
So it's like, but flea markets we hit up. We hit up a bunch of them. We go with the family. The whole family goes, and everybody knows that we're hunting but not hunting. You know, like my wife, she'll see something, and she's like hesitantly telling me, "Did you see that Spider-Man diorama over there piece?" And I look at it and I buy it.
Right.
And she's like, do you really need another piece? But yet she told me, right? Like almost like, what do you want to tease me for it? So anyway,
that's the thing we don't have.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, now that he mentions that, he mentioned something very interesting. So one of the things I think we've wanted to get into for quite some time is actual statues, like the sideshow collectible giant statues.
Right.
That's something that I've toyed with the idea. The problem is we have a great workspace here currently, but these things, I have a cousin in New York who is a massive collector. He was an artist as well, huge collector. The problem with these things is that they're so big, they're really hard to showcase. And in here, with all the stuff we currently have, I don't think we would even have enough room to do it. But let me tell you something. I will tell you, especially now that we've incorporated 3D printing into our work now.
Nice.
The last about year and a half. So we have a 3D printer.
So how does that work?
So it's interesting. So we're able to kind of print parts, things that are needed. Heads that are needed, like we will print different things. Right here. Buckets of heads that we've printed. And I kid you not.
And so
pass me the Hulk one.
So when you're doing 3D printing, are you putting what are you showing as a design? Like how does it know to print up that version of the Hulk head?
Well, so there's two ways of doing it. You could either create it yourself in Blender. So there's a program that you can modify things. And then print them, right? So the 3D printer has a software program. You pull in, whatever design you make, whether it's an object or an STL file, and then you print it. So there's things that you could do, like you could print arms, you could print legs, there's just a plethora of things that you could do. You can find free stuff like logos that go on the superhero's chest, as opposed to having now to fully sculpt that. You could print it and then sculpt on top of it. There's really great ways. We did that recently. I'm pretty sure you probably saw it recently. Aiden, pass me the Hulk, this Hulk head.
The Grey Hulk?
Yeah, Joe Fixit. This is one that we recently. So this was a 3D print of a cheesy version of Hulk.
Right.
And I actually sculpted over the entire piece to kind of turn him into that.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like the Jack Kirby version, right? Is that what
it looks like? So that the 3D printing brings a great element of it differentiates things, right? Like there's something cool about not using a head that's already created and sculpting over it, but printing something. And not only printing it, designing it, making a guy angry or happy, however you want to do it, the control is really cool with that. You could find all kinds of pieces too. Like I could literally, if I like this Lobo bike that we want to make, I could find tons of pieces that are just random space pieces. You buy it and it just has these different forms of pieces that you could put in different parts of the bike to kind of accentuate things. And then you add sculpt and you add these different things. And all of a sudden you went from something that was pretty cool to something that is like, holy shit, now that's cool.
Right.
Like that type of thing. So it brings a whole new element of thinking too for us. Like it's another way now, another avenue to really also express our creativity, not just through the means of something that's already existing and we've changed it into something, but actually doing something that doesn't exist anyplace else and creating something that's specifically unique to Lou and Aiden's. So that part has been really, really a lot of fun with the 3D printer. And we have a small one right now. We're looking towards getting the Phenom. We're looking at the Phenom right now. The Phenom is just this. I mean, like he even will tell you, like it's just an incredible 3D printer that we could do so much with. It's ridiculous, and it's like you can literally print, a Hulk like this big, like literally
just print it out.
Scale wise, like that's one of the limitations of the smaller ones. There's just so much you could do, in each print. Like you could do a forearm to scale. Like you could do something like for a 12-inch figure, an arm, a hand, like different things like that, but you have to do them individually. Whereas the larger printer, you could actually make all these different pieces and print 16 different pieces at once. It'd take a while, but the end result is dope to have like that everything right then and there and not having to wait, several hours.
Just finishing product.
Yeah.
Do you guys have people that send in parts and figures to you? Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're pretty expensive on the commission side because one, I hate sending my stuff out in the mail. Like I will tell you.
It's like a bribe.
Oh, yeah.
Just had one. You just had one.
I know. We just had an incident where, I don't know if you saw our Hulk Bane hybrid that we did a few weeks back. So that was a commission for a guy out in LA. And this guy has notoriously the worst mailman in the history of mailman. And we package these things really secure. This guy literally throws boxes over the guy's fence. I mean, it's horrible. So one, there's the fear of all the work being put into it, and then there's a destructive end point. And then there's no way I can let someone keep a piece like that. I literally make them send it back to me, fix it, and then I send it back to them. But, I think a lot of it is we just – I don't know. I mean, it's hard to explain. Like we tell people, especially like you want to keep costs down. It's really difficult, right? Like, so while I have a plethora of pieces and parts and things like that, one of the things that's really important is that when parts leave, that we replenish, right? Like because we're continuously making, so we have to restock. And I tell people all the time, like, understand that a person works 8 hours a day and they make between $15 to $45 an hour, right? Like, or more, 100. So, a piece like this, like the amount of effort that you pay, no matter how much you pay for it, is never. It's like priceless, right? Like, you're never going to cover the amount of time that it took us to concept it, the amount of time it took us to paint it, then to detail paint it, to sculpt, to add all these things, and then we're creative. That while we're doing it, we're like, wait a minute, this is better. Let's just scrap that idea. Let's start it over. Let's start this piece again. You can't really put a price to that. And so, I think it's been a difficult thing for us. So in recent time, like a few of our people, they like this Hulk guy who wants all these Hulks. Like these Hulks go for between $50 to $75 a pop at this scale. And so, I'm like, price is this. You have to provide the 16 Hulks that you want us to create for you. Like, guy's great though. Like, guy's smart guy. He's a really nice guy. He packs up 16 Hulks and he'll send them to us in batches of 4. So we'll have Hulk boxes all over the place here. But and he just lets us go wild. He's like, I would love for you guys to do it. Joe, fix it. Do your interpretation of it. And we would just go bonkers. Great client. But I've had a few of those. The 6-inch figures. I have a few like steady clients that are continuously asking for work who are really good at just letting us do our thing. And that's what we kind of lean more towards. But I'm not trying to recreate your idea.
Right.
We're just we want you to tell us what you want, right? And then give us an opportunity to show you what we're capable of doing for you, right? Like it's really difficult. And we talk about this all the time. Like when somebody thinks of something in their head, it's extremely difficult for me to interpret what you're thinking in your head. to visualize what you're thinking in your head. So I tell people that all the time, like, trust us, like we do decent work, for that matter, and put your trust in us. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. And if you are, hey, we'll scrap it and we'll do it all over again for you. Just to kind of make you feel like you're somewhat in control, but at the same time, let us do what we do best. And so, as far as that's concerned, we go a bunch of different avenues. Sometimes, like a guy asked me, and if I have a figure, I would love for you to use the Iron Man base. I'd sit back and I'd say, you know what, like the Iron Man base, like it ain't gonna give you the articulation you want. Like, how about we use this? And for the most part, people have been great. Like we really have never had any major issues with people being like they weren't happy with something. They seem to be happy with what they get. So we're lucky in that sense.
I would hope they would be happy.
Hey, listen, man, being an artist is a crapshoot. As good as you can be, as good as you think you are. Like there's so many different levels of that, right? And then there's people who may not be artistic, but they have something that, it's like anything. It's like your job, right? Like your boss may not be the best at what he does, but his expectation is that you achieve this, right? And so people are like that. No matter what, across the board, they put in their request. I'll talk them through it, but the number one thing is communication. Like we just talk, and I continuously send them updates. Like, yeah, here's progress one. Here's a quick sketch of what we were thinking, and then here's like the first layout. Like I'll stick things together real quick so that they can see sort of the base of what we're doing, and then I take it all apart, and then sand it down and paint it. But like I like to give them sort of something for them to see throughout the process so that they can feel like they're a major part of it, So
yeah. Well, we've done an hour, just flew by. I definitely want to do this again. I feel like we could talk for hours about this. I usually like to let my guests, finish up with any like stories or anything else that you want to, any message you want to get out there before we finish up, and then also where people can find you online.
Yeah, man. So you can find us on Facebook. So we're Lou and Aiden's on Facebook. And on Facebook, we're a little bit more of like a combination of we showcase some stuff, we allow other people to showcase some stuff, and then we do a lot of news and announcements because, hey, how could you be a geek if you don't know what's going on, right? Like we all need to know what's going on in the comic book world. We let people know what we're interested in, what we may be reading, just to kind of support comic books in general and sort of this whole world. Then the Instagram page is really for us to showcase sort of, the creativity and the talent and what we want people to really see and love about the work. People ask us questions on there. And so, again, just remember, man, it's not always about us. It's more about just everything about what we do. We just love doing it in general. So we tell people, feel free to, hit us up, ask us questions, however you want. And then, in terms of the customs trade, we get a lot of questions about like, how do you guys do it? Like, how do you guys concept this crazy shit of like, and we tell people, it just takes practice. Really, that's all it is. Like the more you practice and the more you show, the more you display your love for it and the work that you do, the more people appreciate it. And that's kind of what we want to leave you guys with. You know what I mean? And thanks for having us. We really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's a crazy time right now. If you haven't checked out the Instagram or the Facebook, go check it out. Lou and Aiden's Customs. Amazing stuff. We talk a lot about geek stuff on here, from rappers who are in the geek space to artists to everything. So definitely go check that out. You won't be disappointed. Lou and Aiden, thank you guys for stopping by. I'll send you a couple messages to kind of touch base.
Cool, man.
Appreciate your time and stay safe out there.
Yeah, same with you.
Right.
Everybody stay safe out there, and thanks for having us, man.
All right, later, guys.
All right, take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Itty Bitty Podcast. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, review, tell all your friends about the show, share the show, tell everybody you know to check it out, especially while people have downtime right now. Next week on the show, we've got a special guest, Phoenix Cardavale. She's a fitness instructor. She works for Daily Burn. She also is an actress, broadcaster, so she was awesome. We had a great conversation, so that'll be the one coming up this week. Make sure you call into the Hotbox hotline 702-907-TOKE to leave a message for the Choice Nugs only.